What are some ridiculous history facts? Ancient Romans would put sandals on the hands of sleeping people, then tickle their face so they would slap themselves. When the Romans laid siege to Themyscira, a real place weirdly enough, they attempted to tunnel into the city. The Themyscirans released bears into the tunnels. Claudius Drusus died in AD 20 from asphyxiation when he tossed a pear in the air and caught it in his mouth. The pear tree was put on trial, found guilty of murder, and destroyed. A Chinese emperor escaped an assassin by running around a pillar. After 2 hours, the assassin got bored and went home, and wasn't charged for his crimes. At US President Andrew Jackson's funeral in 1845, his pet parrot had to be removed because it was swearing. Colombia has a period in history literally called the dumb homeland period because of how incredibly dumb politicians acted at the time. The shortest war occurred between Zanzibar and the British Empire, lasting around 45 minutes. There used to be bread stamps, burned into a cooked loaf of bread, to avoid bread fraud, as the government supplied the wheat/flour. But some bakers tried to use sawdust and other ingredients in the bread to make the wheat last longer. The bread stamps were baker-specific, so they could track down where any tainted bread came from. If they were caught, they had to move to another town to make bread, or wait 3 years to continue making bread if I remember correctly. During the most critical portion of World War II, the Japanese thought they had sunk or disabled 3 American carriers when, in reality, they had only bombed the USS Yorktown 3 times. They were caught with their pants down when the bombs started landing at Midway. As St. Lawrence was roasted to death on a gridiron, he is said to have remarked to his torturers, "I am cooked on this side, turn me over." St. Lawrence is the patron saint of cooks and comedians. During WW2, a bunch of German soldiers got separated in rural Russia. They were trudging through snow with no food or water for days before finally finding a supply drop that missed its mark. They opened it up and found only black pepper and condoms. General Omar Bradley was stopped by MP during the Battle of the Bulge in WW2 due to them thinking he was a Nazi infiltrator. The irony was that he was stopped because he correctly identified the capital of Illinois as Springfield when the officer thought it was Chicago. The longest ever U.S. presidential inauguration speech was made by William Henry Harrison on March 4, 1841. The day had terrible weather, yet Harrison chose to deliver his speech nonetheless, running 8,445 words. In fact, the speech was so long, and the weather so terrible, that Harrison caught pneumonia and died on April 4th, making him the shortest reigning U.S. president ever. It is told, by Herodotus, that when Xerxes invaded Greece he had to build pontoon bridges, which were destroyed by a storm before completion. Xerxes was so upset at what happened that he had every engineer beheaded and sent soldiers down to whip the sea 300 times for its failure to obey him and comply with his plans. Herostratus is the guy who burned down the temple of Artemis. The only reason he did it was to have his name written down in history. Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln, was present at 3 different presidential assassinations. After McKinley, he decided not to accept any more invitations. Stalin used to take people on the side to have some drinks with them or invite them to join him for a vacation in his holiday home. Khrushchev wrote about how much he hated those drinking breaks and vacations. Of course, Stalin would try to get you drunk and get info from you, and could decide he wants to kill you during the vacation. But you can't really decline his invitation. Khrushchev would also try to subtly get Stalin drunk as well and get info from him. One time during a vacation with Stalin, Stalin asked him to dance a Ukrainian folk dance in front of a bunch of people. Khrushchev hated dancing, but he had to do it. The Massachusetts colony banned celebrating Christmas. During that time period, many people used it as an excuse to get hammered and party. Another tradition was that the young adults would cross-dress, then go door to door singing songs and demanding food. This clearly doesn't fit with Puritan lifestyle. So the governor banned public celebrations. People could still celebrate it in their homes if they didn't get too rowdy. I think it was unbanned when Massachusetts became a state, but didn't become mainstream until Christmas became a national holiday. Nashville briefly legalized prostitution during the Civil War. Union soldiers stationed there kept getting syphilis, so the no prostitutes were put on a large barge in the river. I'm a little fuzzy on what happened after that, but no, it didn't work very well. So it was legalized and prostitutes had to be registered or get a license, I can't remember which, and we are required to have STD checks. This lowered the amount of prostitutes with syphilis because it was getting caught and treated. That lowered the amount of soldiers getting syphilis and made the army happy. It was outlawed shortly after the war ended though. A very high-ranking Nazi, Ernst R.H.M., was gay, was killed 1934, and Hitler knew about it. But it didn't bother him. Funny how homosexuals were then put in concentration camps. During the Viking era, there was a leader named Sigurd. He allied with a Viking warlord named Thorstein. He wanted to conquer more land and expand his territory. He had already been very successful in doing so. This was until he feuded with another leader called Mel Buck-toothed or Mel Tusk. As his front two teeth were abnormally large and buck-toothed, they decided to settle their matters on the battlefield and both agreed on bringing 40 men each for the battle. However, Sigurd ignored the terms and brought 80 men. Buck-toothed had realized he had been betrayed but did not give up. They killed a number of Sigurd's men. But alas, they were overpowered and were all killed. Here's the catch: after the battle, Sigurd ordered his men to behead all the enemies and tie them to their saddles as trophies. However, as Sigurd rode home in victory, the severed head of Buck-tooth pierced his leg, which led to an infection, killing him soon after. The British once sent a guy to China as a spy so he would uncover the secrets of making tea. There are literally entire books of anecdotes of this sort on Ben Franklin. That man was the og of trolling. He was so good at trolling under the pen name of a female, Silence Dogwood. He received several marriage proposals. Only then did he reveal her true identity. Karl Marx's great-great-grandson has a YouTube video of him doing parkour, called !Marx. Hitler, Stalin, Trotsky, Freud, and Tito were all living in the same area of Vienna in 1913. The first known political cartoon is Egyptian, and shows Hatshepsut, the only woman pharaoh, pegging her lover and chief architect Senmut. Henry Cavendish, the man who was vital in the discovery of gases and discovered hydrogen. He inherited a ton of money from his uncle, and built a special castle. I think he was incredibly introverted, so it was designed so that he never had to meet or see any of his servants. He communicated with them through notes only. He did, however, appreciate other scientists coming to visit and talk. His works mostly came after his death, of course, but I found this guy interesting. In 1994, a war almost broke out between Russia and Sweden because of fish farts from herrings. That's how they communicate, because Sweden heard the farts in their waters and they thought it was Russian submarines. Emperor Caligula of Rome declared war on Neptune. He had his troops randomly throw spears into the sea and collect seashells as war trophies. When the Allies were invading Germany *, General Eisenhower sent a message to General Patton telling him to go around Trier because it would take 4 divisions to capture. Patton sent him back a message saying have taken Trier with 2 divisions. What do you want me to do? Give it back. Surprised it didn't get mentioned. But here goes. The freaking Siege of Tyre, by Alexander of Macedon. So, Alexander the Pretty Awesome was doing his thing, rampaging through the Persian Empire, because that's what you do. Anywho, he comes across the island city of Tyre, an impregnable island fortress who had been a wee bit too chummy with the Persians. For Alex the surprisingly vindictive, they had a powerful navy that kept hampering efforts at taking the siege to them. And Alex the more than adequate was getting peeved. Now, the whole issue was that impregnable island fortress required an attack by sea. So, Alexander the balls to the walls just decided to turn a shallow isthmus between the mainland and the island, into a landmass, thus turning Tyre into a peninsula. Crazy shenanigans involving cranes on boats, naval raids to impede on the progress of the Macedonian troops and engineers. In the end, Tyre fell. Alexander the impossibly persistent was rewarded with victory. TLDR. Alex the not too shabby sees an impregnable island fortress, turns it into not an island.